All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to introduce you to today's author event to celebrate National Poetry Month. Today, we will be hearing from three poets. Anastasia Lindsey reading from Ocean, released December 20th, 2022. Elmo Shade reading from The Dark Side of White Bread, released January 15th, 2023, and N.N. Nelson reading from Corpse Beneath the Crocus, released February 15th, 2023. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can order our books on Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chat. At the end of this evening's event, we will have time for your questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type it in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. And then during the reading itself, please stay muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can certainly feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. And one last note, we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we always are looking forward to reading those, so feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Anastasia, Elmo, and Natasha this evening. Let's start off with our first reader, who is Anastasia Lindsey. Anastasia is a timeless soul and author who participates in interdimensional traveling and building beautiful poems to capture the hearts of souls around the world in the most loving and supportive ways possible. This humble writer was born and raised in a small town in Illinois, where she currently resides in a beautiful, cozy little house on a patch of land with the love of her life, Dakota. Anastasia has been writing since grade school and has always used empathy, pain, and most importantly, love as her muse to write poems that help heal. Although an author, she is also the owner of a small business, Summer Solace Holistic Healing and Poetry, where she uses different modalities to help others heal, including Reiki, meditation, sound healing, hypnosis, and recently she started her journey into shamanism. Just when others think there couldn't possibly be more, she always enjoys painting, drawing, crafting, and singing. She even auditioned for The Voice in 2017. Her angelic soul and empathetic nature make her one of a kind in this world, and her words take you on many journeys with the strong hope of allowing you to return back home, safe and in love. In Ocean, we experience the opportunity of connection and to grow with our emotions, to expand past fear as vast as the sea, and become in flow with creation and unconditional love, just like the ocean. Anastasia, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, especially for National Poetry Month. So that's super exciting too. So I just want to thank everyone for showing up, for being here. It means a lot for authors in general, but also us as poets. So I am super thankful, just expressing my gratitude for everyone that's here tonight to hear all three of us read. So I'll be reading some poems from my book, Ocean. It's kind of hard to see, but it's very light and beautiful. I wanted to talk about the cover before I get started. I wanted it to be very peaceful and serene. I wanted whoever picked up a copy of my book to just feel peace. I'm really big on peace in the world for myself, for my family. And so I knew that I wanted to connect with readers in that way too, that even if they didn't know me or anything about my book, if they picked it up, they would feel peace. So I just really wanted peace to be embodied in the cover. So I have three sections in my book. It's deep waters, waiting, and the shore. And then there's a bonus section called Sandcastle. So I'm just going to read some poems out of each section. And I also did not title any of my poems. I did not want them to be limited. What I might call a poem might be completely different to the reader. So I wanted it to just be a free, unlimited experience for the reader. That way, if they wanted to come up with their own titles. So I'm just going to read them and then I'll go on to the next one. As a poet, I sometimes forget how to speak. Like the words are tangled in my mind and on my tongue. I have the words and here they are, but they are dressed in stringy lace and knots are created, like the one currently in my throat. I'm trying to speak spoken word for ears to hear, not just for eyes to see. But I fall back into my comfort zone, using pen and paper. Black scribbled lines connect and flow so easily, like they have rehearsed this many times. I remember my bones ached that night. My cheeks were stained from the tears. The pit of my stomach was empty, but heavy. 2 years of shame, mistrust, and neglect. But the day I said goodbye was the first night I felt ill. I knew I needed to let you go, and it ripped me apart. I remember feeling numb, unable to blink, as 2 years of us flashed in my mind. We were always together, yet I always felt alone. I accepted your flaws. You despised my mistakes. I loved you for who you were, and you declined. I am one line. You are another. Parallel. We will never cross paths again. I guess that is our fate. But I do know forever by your side I will be. Maybe we could shift realities and allow our paths to cross again, because the loss of you will change me forever. I run and I run constantly in my mind back into your arms. And though I may be rambling these words you will never hear, I must say them or my mind will never clear. What an unshakable feeling for me to be the pencil markings as I write our story, and you the eraser. I write, you erase, we revise. I get sad because I know energy does not lie. And I know when you shut off and disconnect from me, that switch in your head and you keep me at a distance. Truth is, I say that I am fine, even when the tears fall down my face, because over the phone, you would never know it, and I will never admit it. But half of me wants you to notice, to hear that crack in my voice, but I'm scared that you won't care. And then that will break me even more. I'm running out of pages in my notebook, and they are crinkled, crumbled, and crisp, dried from the fallen teardrops. I leave them there to dry before closing it for the night. And even when we are not together, I can feel your wall. I have no tools, no strength to break it down. I dream about your body, how I wish it were holding mine, shaping mine, intertwined and not isolated. Truth is, I love you, even when you hurt my soul, even when you create distance. So I also have, before I move on to the next section, I put in between sections and pages lighthouse pages. And so I just wanted to show you that there's a little lighthouse icon at the top of my page. And that is just for the reader to have a safe haven in between poems, something where they can check in with themselves, to take a break from maybe a poem that was triggering. There were moments where I was very emotional writing some of these poems, and I would do affirmations, I would do a guided meditation, I would do a journal prompt. So I wanted a way for the reader to also have the same experience if something triggering came up for them, or if they were deeply emotional, that they had a lighthouse page, a safe haven where they could just take a break from reading, drink water, journal prompt, breathe. And so I just wanted to read a couple affirmations for you. And you can repeat them after me, or you can just say them to yourself. I am okay. I am here breathing. This moment of my life does not determine who I am. My life has value and meaning. I feel low now, but tomorrow is another day. There is nothing wrong with me because I feel sad. This too shall pass. So moving on to the next session. I've never been a talker. Only these books on my shelves got me to speak any words. But as the sun orbits around the stained glass windows, all the colors shape your face, and my vocal cords are smoothed and tuned, and I suddenly want to scream to the world how you have changed my life. I allow a moment for myself of stillness and peace, to hear the words from my higher self. She's asking that I lie on the ground, align with my heart center, and allow the ground to hold me ever so gently. She's asking that I close my eyes and to see the world using my other senses. Then to open my eyes to see the clouds above. Take a deep breath, she whispers. Envision the air traveling down to your body. In this moment, I allow myself to feel and experience any emotions that may arise. Healing is possible. I am here doing it. I am safe. I deserve to be here. I am my home, attuning to the wisdom of what I already know. I am reborn to reclaim my lost pieces. And then the last section. I hear that if a writer falls in love with you, that you can never die. And this I believe to be true, because I have fallen in love with you. And the scribbled letters and words on my paper are filled with nothing but you. Even strangers in different countries will read my story and be in absolute awe. Years may pass and days swift by, but my love for you certainly can never die. Pages might turn yellow and the corners tarnished, but in between those many lines, your name will live on. A tale for the generations to come. A love story that has lasted over many lifetimes. My love for you is storybook worthy, and you deserve to live on forever in my mind and the millions of readers worldwide. I am composed of every person who has sparked my life with light. I am thankful for the colorful bits that make up all of you. You each make me the person that I am today. And I realize that I am only human, but I'm here on this earth to live through this experience. My soul recognizes yours, way beyond the physical. And this is how I want to live my life, adding colorful bits to my palette that make up all of you. That I become part of you and you a part of me. while we all become part of each other, creating, mixing, blending, one universal rainbow. Thank you to those who never gave up on me, even when my palette was nothing but black and white and blended jaded gray. But one by one, you have all added light to my story. And I just have a couple more. Thank you for your existence, for coming into my life and changing it. Thank you for being the gentle waves amongst my rowdy sea, watering me and giving me space to bloom. I thought I'd be lost in the current, inflating water wings to help me stay afloat. My sea, which was dark and muddy, with you became crystal clear. And this is my last one for the night. I asked him what he thought of me. I think I was expecting something along the lines of, "You're beautiful, you're amazing, you're kind." But what I got instead touched my soul. You make the sun on my skin that much warmer. You make the beauty of the stars something everyone wants to admire. You make waking up from peaceful dreams something to look forward to every morning. You are the love letter that mends broken hearts, the reasons why bees move from flower to flower. You are my favorite love story, and I will recite it as long as I live. The moon rises in the sky looking for the beauty that you radiate. You bloom where you are planted, and I am nourished by your strength and brilliance. You are unforgettable. Even when 1,000 light years pass, the light from your soul will always remain. My world is more beautiful because you are in it. Sometimes you catch me staring, but every day I find something new that I love about you. And I have memorized even the slightest wrinkle from joy. And I thank you for making room in your heart to love me fully. You are inevitably pure magic. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. I think there's this really interesting tone to your poems. They have this reflection and this pondering nature, but they express these really intense emotions at the same time. And I love the inclusion of the affirmations and that you did that with us here today. So thank you really for sharing that with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. So reading next today is Elmo Shade. Elmo is an accredited certified mindfulness teacher professional through the International Mindfulness Teachers Association. He is the author of 3 additional poetry collections: Standing on One Leg, Poems of Love, Loss, and the Spaces in Between, 2017, Coffee Grinds, Mindful Poems and Stories for the Less Than Perfect Soul, 2019, and A Glorious Poetic Rage, 2021, and also from Atmosphere Press. He lives and writes in the Pacific Northwest and is an unabashed fan of double IPAs, Opus X cigars, and Rush. The Dark Side of White Bread explores the idea of surviving our fathers through one man's chronological journey of his paternal relationship and the lifelong impact of experiencing emotional and physical trauma. It is a must-read for anyone who spent their childhood seeking safe refuge simply to survive and to heal from the past without anger or regret. And with that, Elmo, it's all you.
Thank you so much. And shout out to Atmosphere Press for just providing this platform for us. What a wonderful opportunity. And a shout out to my poetry family here in the Pacific Northwest and Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver and Camas, Washington. I see a few folks online, and to family and friends that I see online as well. So, hey guys, thanks for showing up. The Dark Side of White Bread was the most difficult manuscript I believe I've ever written. And, I'm not a therapist, but I do know that one of the ways, effective ways that we as adults can heal from particularly childhood trauma is to experience the trauma in a safe environment. And when I think about writing these poems and then publishing them, especially publishing them where my own family can read them, I want them to know that it's not an indictment against my father. He was a good man. He had a hard, difficult childhood. None of us would have signed up for. Unfortunately, that difficult childhood bled over into mine. And so the poems that I'm going to read, reflect a lifelong journey in being the oldest of three boys. It's divided into 5 chronological chapters: the childhood years, the teenage years, the adult years, the hospice years. And then he passed in March of 2014. And the last chapter is entitled The Afterlife. And I'd be remiss if I didn't read the epigraph that I used at the beginning of the poetry book by poet Sharon Olds from her work entitled The Father. She said, he is like a stocking stuffed with things. And also I see Cameron Fish here, and I want to shout out to her for all the help she gave me. Cameron, you're the best. Thank you so much for everything you did for me. This is the opening poem of the book, entitled Some Things in the Pocket of Someone I Loved. One of the first things I noticed driving down my father's lengthy front driveway was him emerging from an open garage door with a bulging left shirt pocket, a pocket protector toolbox stuffed with pens and pencils, Kleenex, mini screwdrivers, all neatly tucked inside. But when I look beyond our years together, I see no apology for the messiness left behind. Pencil lead in my brother's back while playing guns and knives. Ink stains from leaky pens on my arms shaped like 2-inch leather. Tissues my mother used to wipe tears after his rage had ended. Screwdrivers the length of an index finger, each with a thin tooth hooking them over the top of his front pocket, keeping them in their place, keeping everything in its place. When I was about 10, we took our first trip to Disneyland. That was before Disney World, so I'm aging myself. And I remember we were all standing on a corner looking at the opportunity to go in to see a show. And I was given the job of going up to the ticket window to find out how much it was going to cost. And this is my memory of that moment. And it's called What Might Have Been. On a busy street corner, a tall male figure sits in an enclosed glass booth and receives my vacation request. Hey, how much are the tickets? When's the next performance? Hey, did you hear me? Hello? Looking back at the 4 adults, their fingers point at a 10-year-old. A joke, some shaming humor at my expense. Just a boy, too naive to notice. The booth man was wax. Just a boy too young to witness his mother dying in smoker's lungs, too dependent to run away from the rage of a father, from a space that rarely felt safe. Just a boy trapped between uncomfortable laughter and what might have been forgiveness. Just a boy trapped there still. I only ran away once, and I was 18. And this next poem is in the chapter, the childhood years, or the teenage years, excuse me. And part of it is my experience having returned home after running away. And a little introduction to my father. The poem title is called The Prodigal Son. Lucian Goodloe was my father's name. He grew up poor on a peach farm in Ripley, Tennessee, along with 4 brothers. His mother abandoned them when he was a young teen, and he became the adult for the very first time. He had good looks, ripped arms, but I'm not sure he ever experienced the playfulness of just simply being a child. His work ethic became evident every Saturday morning when, after breakfast, as all I desired as a kid was to watch cartoons on our black and white. He had other ideas. Come on, shouted as he walked out the back screen door, meant fetching things he needed when he needed them. He learned by doing, not by teaching. I never really understood how someone could become so excited when it came to changing the car oil. He was always working. I saw him cry only twice. The first, after announcing at breakfast that I'd quit my job, dropped out of my freshman year of college, and was leaving home the following morning with my best friend to travel west. When returning home after running out of money 2 months later, my mother burst into tears. My father was busy slamming doors. I wasn't the prodigal son his Bible spoke of. And the last time was 10 years later. We were leaving the hospital together after my mother died. Standing in the parking lot before walking to our separate vehicles, he broke down sobbing. It was in that moment I knew he had loved her. He softened somewhat after, but being soft was not his persona. I don't really think we ever understood each other. The next poem, I just found out Saturday that it's been accepted to be published in the literary journal of Portland Community College called The Painted Circle, their 39th edition. So that made my Saturday, believe me, with 63 rejections and 3 exceptions. So it's a poor batting average, but I'll take it any day. It's called This One Thing. On weekends, my father and I would rise early, sit silently at the kitchen table, scars like grenade pins between our bodies. It felt safe, if only for a moment. I love the truth in this one thing. The earth swallows up men and their anger. He and I became the discarded ones. Childhood dreams disappeared in broken trust. It's really hard to believe when we were together, our scars slowly softening, of a bond between us severed so short. Angels say fear's the cheapest room in the house. Heroes die harder there. They have no one left to save. On weekends, I sit alone at the kitchen table, remembering about his love, or not. So Father's Day, 1974, I was living alone in an apartment and woke up with the most horrible case of stomach flu in terrible, terrible pain. And the only thing I knew to do was to call my mother to bring the paregoric, which I don't even think they make anymore, but I knew it would solve my stomach issue. And this is my recollection of that morning and that day. And it's entitled Father's Day, 1974. I was in my early 20s. My grown male body lies in fetal form, sweat-soaked sheets, some stomach bug to blame. I need my mother. No, I need her womb. I need to be back inside without this pain. This pain walked to school with me, neck, belt buckled, blistered. Don't hurt him, she screamed. It hurts me more than hurts you. That's what he always said. Claw through carpet to call her, beg her to bring the bottle of brew, medicine to help me sleep. I awakened late afternoon, lying on the kitchen floor, a pillow under my head. I see him seated beside me, where he had been all day, holding my medicine and a spoon. After my mother died, my stepmother, on one visit to their home in Olive Branch, Mississippi, said there were some glass containers that were up in the attic that if I wanted them, I could have them. I knew my mother loved them and I knew they weren't going to use them. So I said, sure, I would love to have them. And this is the aftermath of that invitation to climb up into the attic. I was, in my late 50s. It's entitled The Box. They said I could have them, boxed glass containers stored in the attic after my mother died. My stepmom walked with me up the wooden staircase, leaving Lucian comfortably below, lounging in his living room recliner. I pull down the light cord and see a metal bed frame, old family portraits, bicycle training wheels, and scattered cardboard on plywood sheets. There they are, she said, pointing to a box near an old set of Samsonite. I step over a worn travel bag, plant my left foot on the attic rafter, then reach down to retrieve the box. My right foot misses the rafter, then plunges completely through the sheetrock into the living room. I see an image of my father's head below. Insulation particles float down like pink snowflakes, covering his thin gray hair. Careful to rise, I retrieve the box. Slow walk down the staircase like a 10-year-old caught rummaging through his dresser drawer. Gently dusting insulation from his shoulders. And before "I'm sorry" could ever leave my lips, he offers 4 words I never expected to hear. Are you all right, son? And then I'll finish with the title poem of the book. This is in the section, the afterlife, after he had passed, the dark side of white bread. Again, Hannah, thanks you for the opportunity to read today. The dark side of white bread. He passed quietly, surrounded by family, wearing his white V-neck t-shirt, feet covered in pink hospice socks. I could have asked for them, or maybe a collared shirt, a bolo tie, a cap, something carrying his scent, but I did not. His death was expected. Leukemia gave him less than 3 years. He robbed it of every month. I did not see him take his final breath like I did with my wife, Tracy, nor did I lay my head down on his chest when it failed to rise. Just hours before, I was on duty throughout the night, sitting with him holding a morphine spoon. An unexpected role reversal from 40 years ago in my kitchen, him holding a spoon for me. How can love be so different for the two of them? A wife, a father. How tears for one can be tears so little for another. He loved me the only way he knew how. To have a good laugh, to make turkey and mayo sandwiches on white bread, to pick up the tab. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Elmo. the empathy in those poems, and it's not quite an emotional roller coaster. That's not the phrase I want, but it's really beautiful, melancholy stuff. So seriously, thank you for sharing that with us. Our final reader for today is N.N. Nelson. Natasha is a widow and a single mother living in New Mexico. Her husband was diagnosed with leukemia in March of 2018, and he died in April of 2019 after a year of battling the disease. Poetry became the preferred outlet for Natasha to connect with and re-enter the world. Within the paper folds of Corpse Beneath the Crocus, we experience the vibrant journey of grief as a poetic expression of transformation. The bitter agony of heartache and the exultation of growth gleaned from it are splattered on the pages in a winding roadmap of acceptance. Natasha, the virtual mic is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm grateful to everyone who's shown up to listen today. I dedicate this entire collection to my husband, who I will love forever. And I wanted to read that dedication to you before I started my poems. This collection is dedicated to my love, Justin James Nelson, whose voice echoes in my spirit, whispering sweet words of hope and endurance in an otherwise lonely world. The first poem I'm going to share with you is called Waves. Waves, sitting still, stifling the need to cry, smothering an urge to scream, grief in waves, building, 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 white-capped and rising, a portend of catastrophe, swiftly approaching the composure of a thinning coastline. Higher than the roof peak of a faded cottage, creaking with the strain of stationery. Taller than the old juniper tree planted in a long line of forestry along the edge of private property. Climbing, 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 a wall of blue reaching for the sun, splattering one final hope on the glass ceiling. Soft sand littered with debris, plastic stuck in the junipers like ornaments, garbage left behind as water returns to a smudged boundary. Restoration, the burden of those who endure. The next one is entitled Marionette. Grief, an unruly creature, flaunting its presence in the body as physical pain, a parasite shifting to fill spaces, wresting control from an absent mind, paying little attention to anything but the electrical impulses, tethering it to weak limbs and a loose grip. Numb fingers wrapping the handle of warm coffee, face muscles throb with the effort of stretching tear-stained cheeks into smiles. Back bent in the shape of an old crone with a hump, vertebrae unwilling to straighten. Stiffness like rigor mortis, settling into joints. The weight of life, too much to carry. A marionette, slack and swaying, expression frozen in wet paint. A wooden carving, playing an audience for fools. The next one is entitled Caterpillar. A small wiggly thing on the verge of becoming, living and dead, smudged in sleep. Done with the world and its offerings, ready to transcend in peace. A timeless womb sealed protectively, a chrysalis in the throes of transforming, the fading caterpillar into wings. The next one is called Love Letter, and it's a letter that I wrote to my husband a couple of years after he passed, processing grief and trauma. And it starts out with, My dearest love, I found myself aching for the chance to talk to you all day today, despite the fact that my brain alerts me continuously to the impossibility. My heart simply will not listen, deaf to the echo of your passing from this world. It longs as much as I to have your soul burn against mine with the brilliance it once did. Your touch like scales moving through the bioluminescent bloom of newly awakened light particles. My skin still remembers the calluses on your palms and yearns for the gentle roughness of them, the absence of which is a void beyond mere physical sensation. The empty cavern of my hearing collects bats while waiting for your deep baritone voice to awaken the dark with music. Sight misses your eyes like pools of deep water brimming with koi fish, each one a flash of colorful love in the blue. I miss the clean smell of soap on freshly washed skin and the salty odor of sweat on a hardworking body, both equally enticing. I miss the feel of your mouth, the bottom lip fuller than the top, perfect thickness for the biting pull of my teeth. The taste of you, a flavor I could have sampled and feasted from for an eternity, never growing bored. Death robbed me of my best friend, this safe haven of a partner, locking the secret garden of transcendent love and throwing the key to weeds. I stumble along without you, as if your presence had a sun-like gravity pulling me through daily orbit, and now there is only floating matter and stagnancy. No matter how hard I try to be everything necessary to survive, or how strong I attempt to become, your absence ends up making me feel like less myself without you, though I have never tried harder to be more. People look at me and see strength in a smile, in my ability to forge ahead, eking out as normal existence as is possible. But I feel a great fraud. I'm not strong, and I still don't know how to be without you. Will the agony ever stop? I wonder. Will my heart ever desire anyone but you? Am I cursed to spend the rest of my days pining for the one person I can't have? You have abandoned me with life. Not a whisper of the haunting I had hoped for when I imagined my days full of conversing with your ghost, like Mrs. Muir. Nothing, as though you truly have gone and left me behind. I am as alone now as I feel. For though my body can be touched, my skin can interact with physical presence in this world, my heart and soul are still out looking for you. Birds in flight during the Great Flood, searching for a safe place to land, a home from memory before the storm buried it under mountains of water. Without my birds, the best of me, I am untouchable, which brands me the loneliest woman on this side of time, doomed to a half-life, not quite dead, not fully alive either. I suppose forgetting is not the same as letting go. I once freed you from a swollen body, severing the ties holding you in physical form. Perhaps your spirit longs for freedom now as well. Must we say goodbye a second time? I do not want to, and I worry this makes me selfish. My love limited by attachment to you. If my love is conditional on a benefit to me, like a dream where you kiss me soundly for hours on end and tell me your cell phone in the afterlife allows you glimpses of my experiences outside of time and order, then perhaps my love is lacking truth. If goodbye for now is a necessity for loving you well and truthfully, then I will say it. Again and again, with every breath, no matter how it pains me, I will speak it. Goodbye until we meet again, sojourning souls in different bodies. Love always, wifey. The next one I'm going to read is called Water. Eyes close and thought turns to water. Droplets suspended in the act of falling, so they appear to float, defying the gravity of ordinary thoughts. The longer they hold focus, the clearer they become, like fish swimming for the surface, reflections from an old world, an old life, perhaps more ancient than suspected. The many aspects of a face, refracted in a prism, rainbow colors rippling through each one, sadness, hope, laughter, anger, in every watery orb, ghosts haunting the floating islands of lucid thought. Nothing else emerges from the deep, not magic or creativity, usually so free in appearance. No, just a face, preserved in water droplets of memory, liquid dreams for a parched soul to drink. The next one is called Evolution. Freedom is a craving, like chocolate truffles at the bloody time of each month, and a dip in the pool when panties stick with sweat to every crack and cranny. Ice water when the tongue between teeth feels more like dead wood than an organ for tasting. Freedom is a dream, more potent than love, more far-reaching than acceptance. The freedom to just be, whatever that looks like, feels like, day to day to day. Change everything, unlearn and learn anything. Evolve to a singular rhythm only a listening soul can match. Transforming into something powerful, infinite, complete, in and of oneself. The next one is called Memory. Memory is heavy, cement bricks tied to feet on the edge of a push into the river. Memory is liquid in heaving lungs, everything burning in a breathless pause. Memory is nothing but opaque blue, seen through a flurry of bubbles as oxygen flees a sinking wreck for the surface. Memory is quiet, except for a raging heart, screaming for one full breath. Memory is cold, numbness spreading through every limb, searing the last touch of sunlight into frozen skin like a brand. Memory is sinking in terror and silence, struggling against the bindings, desperation without hope. Memory is full lungs trying to breathe water, dreaming of air and oxygen, longing for the sweetness of relief. Memory is a nightmare, glimpsed with waking eyes, an inescapable reality one cannot awake from. Memory is a bloody choice between loving and forgetting, where the cost is pain, no matter which one is chosen. And the last one I'm going to read is Corpse Beneath the Crocus. A moonlit night full of stars and the dull gray of thunderclouds rolling in to blot them out. The roar of a rising storm, rage in a burst of light, pulsing and primal. Elemental skin swallowing the moon, drinking the tears of the sky, and dancing to the chaotic drum of rebellion, as creatures and people clash to possess the carcass of a dying world. The wail of a passing planet, the weeping of its weary spirit. Smell the raindrops as they fall to the ground, a feast of sadness for the forest roots. Hear the screams of a small seed sprouting its dreams of a tree. The cradle of slow motion, softness in the calm, a pregnant pause between full and empty. Every broken, bleeding thing, birth and death, the cycle of growth and life tucked between the two. Find me sleeping in the wilderness of my being, a towering forest fluttering with the feather wings of beautiful feelings. Sit in the crook of my broken body as it births a meadow of wildflowers, sheltering a den of bones. Breathe the scent of corpse and crocus as both fall to rot and ruin. Meet me in the wandering woods and tuck your soul in the endless folds of an untamed spirit, the budding frontier of creation. Thank you so much for listening. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Natasha. I have so many things that I want to say, and I don't think any of it would really do justice to that. I mean, it's just, you are speaking the words that so many people feel and don't know how to express. And I know so many readers find such solace in your work. So thank you for sharing that with the world. So we have about 10 minutes for our audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. I'll give everyone a couple minutes to be thinking and putting questions in there. But to start us off, in honor of National Poetry Month, I wanted to hear from each of the three of you. What does poetry mean to you? I know it's a bit cliche and perhaps vague, but if you have any thoughts to share. Maybe Anastasia, do you want to start us off?
Sure thing. I think poetry to me is the secret language of a soul. It's something that a lot of people understand, other poets understand, poetry readers understand, but I also think it's a secret language that I wish a lot of people could tap into. And it also reminds me of this, I think I read it on social media somewhere, and it's like, just imagine the world if everyone wrote poetry and the depth of the conversations that we would have with one another and the things that we would be able to talk about so freely. Because I feel like for a poet, I can be as deep and vulnerable as I wish in my poetry and talk about things that I wouldn't normally bring up on one-on-one conversation. So poetry is just that secret love language of a soul that we can be vulnerable, we can be deep, we can express our feelings and be vulnerable. And I hope more people tap into this language of poetry and really use it to express themselves.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of idea that poetry is, well, it's gatekept in a lot of ways. And I love that idea that, you know, everyone should try accessing that part of themselves. Elmo, do you have any of your own ideas about what poetry means to you?
Well, I'll sum it up in just one quote. I think this came maybe from Billy Collins, who's one of my favorite poets. He said, poetry is like, is the ability to leave your mop in the closet more often.
And there you have it, folks. Concise, like a good poem. Natasha, and for you, what does poetry mean to you?
Oh my goodness. Poetry has always been a way for me to get what was happening on the inside of me onto the outside of me. I feel like it's a little bit like slicing yourself open, and ink is a way for what you're feeling to sort of appear in this way that you kind of weren't expecting. It's always a surprise to me to start writing, not having a plan, not knowing where I was going to go with a poem, not knowing what I was going to do, and watch it sort of evolve on its own into this thing that really gives me a lot of insight into who I am as a person, who I am as a writer, how I'm feeling, a way to connect with myself. And I sort of love that journey that it takes you on when you focus on what you're trying to say without really having a plan of how you're going to say it. And it's just this beautiful way of almost self-discovery and self-expression and self-acceptance, and a way to really just be honest in how you're feeling and processing through some of those things that are maybe kind of hard to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Another point for everyone dabbling in poetry, perhaps. See what it reveals about yourself.
Mhm.
We have another question for all three of you. This is from KC to all of you. Any advice for young authors or poets? Maybe Elmo, do you want to start us off this time?
Sure, absolutely. And when I was growing up, I remember reading my first poem at the dinner table, looking for some type of affirmation. And I think the next thing I heard someone say, "Could you please pass the salt?" So I would say to young poets, and we have a poetry open mic once a month here in Vancouver and Camas, Washington. And we have youth come in to read. It's open to youth as well. And we just encourage them to use their poetry as that level of affirmation. Maybe they're not getting that through social media. Maybe there's bullying going on, or judgment, or shame. But hearing these youth read these poems, they're bringing that out in their work. So use that poetry as a cathartic way of affirming that that you're providing value and you're changing someone's life every time you stand in front of the microphone or pick up the pencil.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of fear around that sort of thing, but just putting yourself out there, especially it sounds like in your community, Elmo, it's a very supportive group of authors. So definitely, I can see there would be so much benefit to that. Natasha, from you, any advice that you might have for young authors or poets?
Yeah, I think the hardest part of writing anything is getting over the idea that it has to be perfect, that it has to be this beautiful thing from the start, and getting past your own perfectionism. At least that's how it was always for me. It's starting and allowing it to be what it is. It's continuing even when you feel like it's not good enough. It's being willing to accept criticism and feedback and use it to grow your own writing and your own style. But I think the biggest thing is just really that sense of fearlessness of no matter how this is received, no matter how someone else feels about this, this is a piece of me that I am releasing into the world, and I am going to be okay with it. I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to keep writing no matter what kind of reception that it receives. I think the biggest thing is just to keep writing, to keep attempting, to keep all the imperfect pieces that you've written, even if you think that they're horrible, to keep them and to read them 10 years from now and realize this beautiful journey that you've been on and how far you come in that time, and to be able to appreciate that.
That is one piece of advice that, in my opinion, could not be overstated. So totally agree with Natasha on that one. And Anastasia, any advice from you to young authors or poets?
Yeah, so I have to answer this question a lot. And I always say use poetry as an opportunity for self-discovery. So if you want to learn something new about yourself, write poetry. It doesn't matter what it's about, what topic it is. And if you have this fear that you're not going to be good enough or that you're not going to be a poet, use that as your driving force to write about that. So write a poem about your fear, and write a poem about, I don't know if I'm going to like this poem. And just let your imagination take you anywhere it wants to go, because you're going to learn so much about yourself just by writing poetry. And also don't get in your head about is people gonna like this poem? Is this good? Kind of like what Natasha was saying, because that will block your creativity. Just write as a form of self-expression, creativity, self-discovery, and you're gonna start learning things about yourself that you didn't even know was a part of you, if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah. Art in any form, I think, is useful for that, but I can see that poetry especially, would have that almost like that power, I guess, to do that. I want to wrap up with one more question. This is another question from Casey to all three of you. And the question is, how did you know that poetry was your calling? I would love to start with Natasha on this one, because Natasha's previous published project before this was a children's book. So this is kind of a pivot to poetry. So Natasha, if you want to kick us off on this one.
Sure. Poetry was always something that I did for myself. I have journals and journals and journals and stacks that I wrote as a way, even in my early 20s, of processing through very difficult and challenging situations. I needed some way to get my feelings out so that they were no longer internally tormenting me. And in my 20s, it was all very, very dark and dramatic and, Edgar Allan Poe style. And I was like obsessed with the whole thing. And I love reading poetry because I feel like there's so much passion in poetry. And I feel like as a passionate person, there's no better way to sort of hook people into the way that you're feeling than to write a poem about how you're feeling and to just sort of snatch them with a specific phrase or something that brings to mind a memory of theirs, and you just hook them in and you reel them in and they're like, oh my gosh, I've totally felt this way before, or I've totally had that thought. And it's like that's the best thing to me about poetry, is that it starts and it ends in a very short amount of time. It's not like a novel that you have to work on for ages to complete. You start with a thought and you end it, and it's just this beautiful package wrapped up in a bow, and you're just sharing it with everyone. And I think that it's such a great place to start as a writer. You're creating an idea or a feeling or painting this picture in words, and you're finished in an hour with a rough draft, or 15 minutes if you're a frantic scribbler. So I think that's why I've always loved it, because it's passionate, it's expressive, there's so much freedom to kind of just play with it however you want. There's rules, but there's so many ways that you can bend them and shift them and shape them as a creative person, that I feel like there's really no limits. And that's what I like about it.
Definitely. And the human connection, of course, always plays an amazing role in that, like you said. Anastasia, I'm also curious to hear from you, especially because poetry features into your work and obviously is important to you. So how did you know that poetry was your calling?
Yeah, so it was in grade school, I think third or fourth grade, and I was in English class, and one of our assignments was to write a poem. And so I did, and the reaction that I got from my teacher really made me feel special. I went to a predominantly white school, and I am mixed race. So I always felt like I never felt like I belonged, and always was looking for something to make me feel connected in the world. So that poem that I wrote was the one thing that really made me feel like, oh, there's a light bulb going off inside of me right now. And the way I felt after I wrote that poem, I knew I wanted to continue doing. So I never stopped. I always wrote poetry for special occasions, for birthdays. I just thought of any reason to write a poem. And then as I got older, I realized that, wow, poetry is an outlet for me to heal just from trauma and childhood things and just things that I went through. I needed some way to get all of those emotions out. And so poetry became my outlet to do so. And then as I got even older, I decided that I always like to help people. and I have in many ways, but then poetry became that one extra thing that helped me reach people, even from different countries and from different states. And so now it's just a part of me. It's a part of my healing. I want other people to heal. And when people read my poetry, I want them to be like, okay, healing is possible, or I am okay. I do belong in this world. I can be a poet too. And so I think poetry is that outlet for people to really tap into them true selves and to tap into healing and to tap into love, most importantly. So it's a part of me now. It's not going anywhere.
And that's what we love to hear, of course. Elmo, wrapping us up. How did you know that poetry was your calling?
Well, my fondest memory, I think, was in the 4th or 5th grade. We had to read a poem in front of the class and then talk about what it meant to us. And afterwards, the teacher wanted to see me after class and waited till all the other students had left. So I thought I was in deep, you know what. And she said, Elmo, I'm really not sure what you'll end up being when you grow up. But here's one thing I do know. You're the only kid in my class that can take 3 minutes of information and talk on it for 15. So, realistically, my calling was mindfulness. I'm a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher and have been teaching mindfulness for over 15 years. But I started really getting serious about poetry when my late wife was diagnosed with a fatal illness. And I remember a friend giving me Rilke's book, The Book of Hours. And to this day, it's the most influential poetry book I own, The Book of Hours. It was so cathartic to read through his work and his experiences dealing with grief and surviving that grief and coming out on the other side, that I knew that I had to take what I knew could be a love a little further and deeper. And so I started that in 2015, and I hope I never stop.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of this, poetry sticking with you and continuing it and growing and developing with it. And I just think in the spirit of National Poetry Month, that's an amazing thing. And I hope that all the poets out there budding or developed or deep in their career, whatever it is, that they're also, taking the same thing away from all of this. So thank you to all three of you so much. It was so wonderful to hear all of your voices and to hear your words spoken by you as the creators. So thank you so much to Anastasia, Elmo, and Natasha for your generosity tonight with your time, your words, your thoughts, and really being here with us in the spirit of Poetry Month. And thank you, of course, as always, to the audience for celebrating these incredible poets with us. Don't forget that you can order Ocean, The Dark Side of White Bread, and Corpse Beneath the Crocus from the links in the chat. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com because you can browse our new and forthcoming releases, you can sign up for our email newsletter, or you can submit a book manuscript of your own. Feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended tonight's event. So we'll look forward to hearing from you in whatever manner it is. But until then, that's it. And have a great rest of your week, everybody. And a great rest of Poetry Month, I should say.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.